Welcome to Tony at 12. I'm Tony LeBlanc, and today I'm in conversation with Isabel Picornell, and we're going to talk about the up and coming Alderney Literary Festival. Good to see you.
Oh, nice to be on again, Tony.
It's an annual event
It is, yes.
for me as well as you. I believe this is number nine, isn't it?
It is. It should
Yeah,
have been number 11, but we
yeah,
lost 2 years to COVID.
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
yes, number nine.
What's the theme this time?
Well, we thought of something similar to what we've had before, but with a difference.
Yeah,
It is weaving the narrative and it's the linearity of time. So essentially, when historians and novelists write their books, they pick events out of all the hundreds of events that have happened,
mm,
but they pick the events that will best fit their narrative, their story. So you expect it from novelists because it's plot, but it's interesting that historians also do it because historians argue points. So they pick events that have a cause and effect and they string them along a timeline.
yeah.
And so this is what this festival is all about, talking about how that story gets constructed.
Now, the dates are
The 28th to the 30th of March.
okay.
So later than normal, but we hope the weather will be a bit better.
Yeah, I think you have to factor that in these days, as you know from
Yeah.
bitter experience. Tickets, I believe all the Rovers have gone. Any others available?
Well, almost all of them have gone.
Yeah,
The Rovers and most of the tickets went in the first 24 hours. It's incredible. I've never seen anything like it. So most of the talks are sold out. We have four talks still available, but they're probably about five tickets or less.
yeah,
So the opening talk and the closing talk. The closing talk will be interesting by our chairman, Anthony Riches. But anyway, then we have for Anna Abney, who is talking on Measham Hall.
hmm,
This is very interesting. I enjoyed the book. It's a series based on a family that around this manor house called Measham Hall. And Anna Abney is actually the last descendant of this family. So she's writing around her own family history. And it's
interesting.
set in the 17th century
Mm.
and how the religions of the time. So there was all this upheaval from Henry VIII
Yeah,
going on. And so yeah, and it's how this period was the making of modern Britain.
um,
And the other author
yeah,
is Ellen Alpsten, who's talking on her book, The Last Princess. And that is based on Geetha Haraldson,
hmm,
who was a daughter of Harold, King Harold, the last Anglo-Saxon king of England before he got beaten by
one
William the
in the
Conqueror.
one in the eye.
Yeah, 1066 and all that. But it's her story of how she escapes to Denmark. And I won't tell the rest of it, but
No,
it's
no,
an amazing woman.
you have to be careful about giving the game away, don't you, on these things?
Yes.
Just to stay with the housekeeping side of it. Where's the venue this time?
So it's still in the Island Hall. It's the
Okay,
usual venue in Anne French Room, talks in the Anne
yeah,
French Room,
yeah,
and book sales in the main hall with
hmm,
the kitchen. We have six book clubs. So six book clubs from the island have come on board and they've selected the books they wanted. And these are free.
hmm,
So if you can't get a ticket to see an author
yeah.
or one of the authors, there are tickets available for the book clubs.
Now we always leave this
So,
right to. Sorry. Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
No,
Go
and
ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and the venues are a combination of the Georgian Jacks
Hmm.
and the Blonde Hedgehog.
Yeah, that's for the sort of out of Island Hall activities.
That's
Now,
right.
the
Yeah.
one thing we always leave to the last minute, and it's a rush, is naming the sponsors. So I think this time round, before we get on to the authors, give us the sponsors, please, Isabel.
I know they are so important. We couldn't do it without them. We are very lucky that Polygon Collective has decided to sponsor the festival for the third year. So that's amazing.
Mm,
We're very grateful to them. And then we have the individual author sponsors. So these are companies that pick their favorite authors and they sponsor that author's expenses,
yeah,
flight, accommodation, that sort of. And we have AEL, so Alderney Electricity, who's been with us from the beginning. We've got Gower,
hmm,
who this is about the third or fourth
yeah.
year they've
Gower
been
Financial
here.
Services, yeah,
Our Financial
yeah,
Services,
yeah.
yes, well
Okay,
known on the island.
yeah.
The Liberation Group,
Hmm.
so they're also sponsoring. This will be their second year, and so we're waiting to hear on others who said they're interested. So we're waiting for confirmations.
Surely good to get that sort of support, isn't it?
I don't know, times are tough.
Yeah.
Money is short, even in business,
Mm,
and it was tough last year. Last year we only had half the sponsorship that we had the year before.
yeah.
Uh, this year, who knows? We are grateful for everybody who sponsors.
Mm,
And as you know, and everybody knows, the cost of flights, the cost of accommodation, the cost of meals, everything has gone up.
yeah.
We're keeping our sponsorship package the same.
Yeah.
Even our ticket prices haven't gone up in, I don't know, what, 6, 7 years.
That's very good.
And yeah, we can do that because we have sponsorship to
Yeah.
take the flack.
Yeah. 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 That's good. Right. Let's get on to the authors. And the first gentleman we got to mention is Simon Scarrow, who's been here before.
I know, yes. And he actually emailed me and he says, I'm coming to Alderney in March for a week. So he's researching his book,
All right.
which is inspired by Alderney. And so I said, great, do you want to talk at the festival? Because he now lives in Mauritius. So you can't actually say, come for the festival and we pay for your flights. But the fact he was in the UK and coming to Alderney, so I grabbed him.
Yeah. Good. Okay.
So
And
he's going to be talking on his Berlin trilogy.
mhm,
So a departure from his normal Roman books. So this is about an inspector, a German police inspector, set in the late 1930s, operating in Berlin.
okay. So that should be interesting. And then another returnee is Clare Mulley.
Yeah, she's always good for a talk. Her books, as you know, are always based on strong women
Yeah.
in wartime settings. And this time she's talking about well, a famous but unknown Polish spy called Agent Zoe. This is her story. She spoke last year, if you remember, on the three female pilots who
Yeah.
flew for Hitler,
Yeah.
and that was very interesting. So this will be. She presents very well, and her talk is sold out, as is Simon. We have a waiting list for Simon's
So
talk.
the first two have got World War II connotations. We've then got a gentleman called Leo Vardishvilli. Is that how you pronounce it?
Vardishvilli,
All
Leo
right, okay. Yeah,
Vardishvilli.
I'm bad on
This is
pronunciations.
this is our debut author, and his book is called Hard by a Great Forest.
Hmm.
And if that name sounds familiar to you, it's the description of the witch's house in the Hansel and Gretel
All right, okay.
um,
Yeah.
tale. The witch lived hard by a great forest. And this is partly biographical because Leo was a child refugee from Georgia in the South Ossetia Wars. And this is basically the story of, novelized how he and his brother and father made it to the UK, but they didn't have the money to pay the people smugglers to bring their mother.
All right.
So she stayed behind. And this is the story of what happens to the people who stay behind. And they end up, the characters, the boy Saba, who is Leo, goes back to Georgia to look for what happens to his father and his brothers, who also go back and then disappear. So it's a dark story, but there's quite a lot of dark humor to lift it.
Hmm.
But it is, yeah, it's a sad story about the plight of refugees. You know, the people who make it are vilified,
Yeah.
but have a new life. But the people they leave behind, um, it's very sad.
Yeah, it's splitting a family, isn't it? Was it during the Soviet era when the Russians were
Um,
in control?
when was the South Ossetian Wars? I don't remember.
No.
Um, no, I don't remember what that date. I was still alive, so it might have been in the 60s or
Yeah,
alive
yeah,
still. I
yeah,
was
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So it
yeah.
was 60s or 70s,
Yeah, so that
and
that would have been Soviet Russia in control, wouldn't it?
just about the end of,
Yeah,
because Georgia split from South Ossetia, and that
yeah.
was Civil War type.
Mm, mm. Now, another lady coming over is Rosie Garland, who's got a new novel called The Fates.
And Rosie has been here before. She is a writer of Gothic novels. So she came for the very first Gothic festival. Now she's moved into historical fiction.
Hmm.
And this is a very interesting retelling of the Greek legend of the Fates. The Fates, as you know, are the three old women who weave the string of life. And one starts the weaving, the other one untangles the knots, and the last one cuts it, which is where you die. And so this is a retelling of that story where the fates decide that they no longer want to be immortal, or
Yeah,
they no longer want to decide the fate of man. So man should be free to decide, how their life goes instead of it being predetermined. And so this is that retelling. Uh, I really enjoyed it. It's, because it's based on a myth, it's kind of mystical,
mm,
historical, but quite enchanting to read.
yeah, yeah. That's interesting.
And
Now, you
she's a
get
great storyteller.
yeah,
You know,
yeah. So she should be good on her
yeah.
lecture. Yeah, yeah. Right. Next one is Lavie or Lavie Tidhar.
Lavie Tidhar. Yeah.
You
So
don't know. You
Lavie is,
really test me every year on these pronunciations.
isn't it?
Can we have the
I may be
Smiths and the
getting
Blogs?
well,
Tell us about
Lavie
it.
is an Israeli author,
Hmm.
and he is quite a genius. He writes poetry, he writes science fiction, he writes children's books, and he writes these series of, well, they're not a series, but they're along the same line. They're sagas, historical sagas about families. And one of his previous sagas was about an Israeli family, well, a Jewish family who
Hmm.
settled in Israel,
Yeah.
and the problems they encounter, from, well, their fellow settlers and Palestinians. And it's a very open-hearted, he writes very open-heartedly, warts and all. Now, this book that coming here is called Six Lives,
Hmm.
and it is about the lives of six people over 400 years. But what connects them is a gold watch. So that's a really interesting aspect of narrative. It, they may be vaguely related to each other by family, but there's an object that
Which is
connects
handed
all
down.
of them,
Yeah.
which
Handed
is
down.
handed down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Okay.
and people then forget who originally owned it and what it originally meant. But it influences the decisions they make in their lives.
It's an
And
interesting
this is,
concept.
yeah, it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking forward to hearing him.
Hmm. Now, here's one I can pronounce, Flora Johnston.
Flora Johnston. Well, she's coming from Edinburgh.
Hmm.
She's a Scottish writer. This story, The Paris Peacemakers, is based on her grandmother, who was a stenographer during the Versailles Conference. So
Okay.
the Paris Peace Conference at the end of World War One.
Yeah.
And it's told from the point of view of two families, um, uh, two sisters, one who becomes a nurse and the other who becomes this typist, and members of the Scotland rugby team, the last international played before World War One was between Scotland and France.
All right.
And of course, well, I say of course, but all this nationalism at the start of the war, and the rugby teams sign up to be soldiers.
Yeah.
And it's what happens to them and what happens to the members of the French international rugby team. So this is all interwoven together, and it's heart-wrenching in parts. I cried it's in parts of it because the descriptions of the World War One battlefields are, and this is after the war.
Yeah.
So the stenographer part, her brother dies, and she goes looking for his grave, and it is heart-wrenching. Um, but it's very good about the attitudes of the war, the attitudes of the time, which were quite repellent,
Yeah.
from different nationalities and yeah, it paints an ugly picture of the reality of the peace conference and makes you understand why World War II happened.
Well, I think the Germans felt they were humiliated, didn't they? And that was an excuse for World War
Well,
Two almost.
they were,
Mm.
from the story, they were deliberately humiliated. It's no excuse to start World War II, but that's where the feeling that they were ground they were ground down through reparation payments
Yeah. And
and
high
huge
inflation.
money
Yeah.
and so it's a story set in this period, and it's eye-opening.
Mm. Mm. Okay. Lesley Downer, lady, of course, Lesley, and she's got the shortest history of Japan. That sounds interesting.
It is. It's a series. It's a book series called The Shortest
Right.
Histories or The
Of
Shortest
various
whatever.
places. Yeah. Hmm.
Yes, that's right. And she's a Japanese expert. She's part Japanese herself. And so this is her book. She does a fantastic job because, as you know, Japanese history is very long and very complicated,
Yeah.
but she makes it understandable in the way she narrates the story and entertaining as well. And so, and what she does as well is she connects it to what's happening in Europe at the same time. So you get this association that helps you understand the context in which it's happening. And it's because it's short, it's readable, and it is, it's, I see it all the, when I'm in London in the bookshops, Waterstones and Waterloo Station. Her book is all over the place, and this will be interesting.
Does it span a large period of time or?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
spans, whoa, so, 3,000 years.
Wow.
So she starts at the beginning before the Japanese nation existed and how people, the Koreans, migrate into southern Japan
Hmm.
and the different populations come over and which create different populations
Yeah.
which concentrate in different parts of Japan. And then eventually how they're brought together under the first Japanese rulers, who then establish a culture which unites Japan because it's their one writing, one
Yeah.
religion.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you understand how there are all these different um, people types,
Yeah.
but they're all united. And it was basically a forced assimilation,
Mm.
but seems to have worked. And interesting also where the power lay, because we all know about the shoguns.
Yeah.
Um, they were the real power, not the emperor. And it seems that the emperor's position was not hereditary, it was voted on by the shoguns, who alternated between the different shogunate families in, well, taking their turns,
Yeah.
basically,
Yeah.
as emperor. So again, I say this about all of them. They're worth going to because we've handpicked them. All of these have been selected out of dozens of authors who have written to us wanting to come, dozens of books we've read, and these are our selection.
But because, of course, when you first started it, you were having to ask authors. It then established a reputation, and they now say, "Can we come?" And that's good, isn't it?
Yes,
Mm.
it is. It's
You'd be
great. It
very
makes our
proud of
job.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
It
Very
makes it
much so.
easier, but then you have to sort through the books. Like
Mm.
I said, we read every single book,
Mm.
and we have a diverse audience for the literary festival,
Mm.
and we have to choose books for everybody. So we have a range from very readable, like Anna Abney, who we're going to talk about, and
Mm.
Ellen
Yeah.
Alpsten,
Yeah.
to the other end, the serious historical stuff like Clare Mulley.
Right. Okay. We're going to come on to another unpronounceable for me. Eleni. I'm not going to try the surname. That's down to you, Isabel.
Eleni Kyriacou.
Yeah, well, I would
She
never have got there.
is an award-winning journalist.
Hmm.
She's Greek. Well, she has Greek backgrounds.
Yeah, yeah.
And her book is a thriller, a historical thriller. And you say thriller, but it is based on the story of the penultimate woman to be hanged in Britain. So everybody knows the last woman to
Yeah,
be hanged
Ruth
in Britain.
Ellis.
That's right.
Yeah,
But
not the penultimate.
nobody has heard of the penultimate one,
Who who,
and whose
who was
name
she?
she. Well, in this book, she's called Zina Pavlou, but that's not her real name. But
Okay.
Zina was an illiterate peasant Greek Cypriot who came to England to visit her son,
Hmm.
who had emigrated some years before and married um, a British person. And in the actual history, because I'm not going to tell you about the book, but
No.
it very closely mirrors. It's basically Zina is put on trial for the murder of her son's wife.
Okay.
So it's alleged she murders her daughter-in-law. And so the story is about, surrounds an interpreter. So the novel part of it is an interpreter who is brought in to interpret, well, for Zina, who cannot speak English. In real life, there was no interpreter. In real life, in the trials, it was her son who interpreted for her, which these days talk about conflict of interest.
Mm.
from the time that Zina is arrested, the novel is based entirely on police and court transcripts. So it closely models. But what's interesting I found was the attitudes to foreigners this is 1952.
Yeah.
Even in the courts, uh, and the fact that she was illiterate, she didn't understand what was going on, and there's a very, very interesting twist at the end, which is a twist in the real story. But with the moment I read this book, I just thought, yes, I've got to invite her. And she took some convincing. It wasn't because she's a journalist,
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess she wants her book to be read because of the social justice issue of it.
Mm.
But yeah, she took some convincing, and now she seems really keen. And she's going to be in conversation with Rachel Abbott.
Yep.
So
That should be good.
Rachel,
Our resident
yeah,
author.
absolutely.
Right. We mentioned Ellen Apsten in the first part, but would you like to enlarge on that?
Yes, so Ellen has previously written a series based on the wife or the Tsarina wife of Peter the Great, which was
Hmm.
very well received.
Yeah.
So that series is still ongoing, but this is a new series she started called The Last Princess, which is based on the life of I think it's the youngest daughter or one of the daughters, Geetha
Hmm.
Haraldson, the daughter of Harold II, who was
Yeah.
the last Anglo-Saxon king of England. And she survives, um, well, she's at the battle with her parents, with her mother, and she escapes to Denmark.
Right.
So there's very little material on her of what happens after her escape. We know who she marries, she becomes a queen in her own right, but this is her story. Uh, the so the thing about historical novels is you have known events, but nothing in between,
Yeah.
and even less for women.
Hmm.
So the novel parts come in with this story. And yeah, so Ellen is originally from Kenya, and I've spoken to her. She's a very gushing lady, and really looking forward to coming here.
She
So I
should
look
be
forward.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, she
Let,
should be a good presenter.
yeah. Yeah. Let's enlarge also on Anna Abney. We mentioned her briefly at the beginning.
Yeah, so Anna Abney is also Madeline Dewhurst. So she writes different type of fiction
Hmm.
from her name. So it's Anna Madeline uh, Abney Dewhurst is her full name.
Yeah.
And she is the descendant of the original owners of Measham Hall. And this is a story of um, the 17th century when there is an incident. Well, there is a problem with the inheritance of Measham Hall. So who inherits it? There's people have died, or somebody's gone off to become a
Yeah.
priest,
Yeah.
and it was a dangerous time for a Catholic priest. So Measham Hall was one of the Catholic strongholds at the time when England was turning Protestant. And then you had not only Protestant, but you had like the Quaker religion starting.
Yeah.
And this
Yeah.
was a time of movements of people, and also the Great Plague in London. So you have huge movements of people across England, bringing with them their ideas, their different lifestyles. And so this story, this series surrounds that, and how Measham Hall is involved in, well, the events, the tumultuous events of those times.
Yeah.
It's a great read. It's uh, quite a lot focused on religion, on the movements, but that's
Mm.
the point of the
Yeah.
series.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that was the trigger point, as it were. Okay, we better mention the festival chairman again, Anthony Riches.
He is, and I also want to mention the two talks he's going to host.
Hmm.
So he will host the first panel discussion, the opening talk, which will
Yeah.
be on the festival theme, the linearity of time. And he will also be giving the last talk, which is temporarily entitled Not Where You Thought. And I can't give you what it's about because people will start Googling it. But it's basically one of um, humanity's great sagas.
Right. Okay.
Everybody assumes occurred somewhere, but there are theories that suggest this all took place somewhere else.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
this is his talk. So, what he's going to do is present the evidence, and in the end, the audience will have to decide, did this event actually happen where everybody says it did?
Yeah.
Or did it actually happen somewhere else? And this is part of the interest um, of storytelling, where you have great events that are told by mouth, but they can move
Mm.
across the world. So you have these issues. I don't know if you remember, a couple of years ago, we had fairy tales, somebody talking on fairy tales,
Yeah.
and I can't remember his name, but he was talking of how these Chinese fairy tales or these fairy tales from Japan ended up as
Mm.
German fairy tales.
Yeah.
So you have these stories moving with population moves and then end up with a life of their own somewhere completely different. So this is really worth going to. If there is one talk you're going to go to and want to be challenged on, yeah, history, this is it, the
So,
last
so
talk.
the audience will actually vote on the decision at the end, yes?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Okay. So they could change history.
Well, maybe take up a petition to change,
Anything.
yeah, change history.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry to have to say we are running out of time, but can I say, and this is not patronizing, okay? Well done to you because you put an awful lot of effort into these things, and the success of the thing is proved by the fact that the authors come to you now rather than you going to the authors.
Well,
So
we
well
have a
done.
great team. We have a
Yeah,
great team.
yeah,
Obviously it can't happen just me. I would need to go and lie down in a dark room. But yeah, we have a
yeah.
great team around the festival, and I'm very grateful to all of them.
And it's very, very good that something like this can promote Alderney at a time when we're in dire need of, trying to get more people here and everything else.
Yeah, well, I'm fingers crossed that there are the planes to bring them here. As you know, last year we nearly didn't have a
Yeah,
festival
yeah.
because of the weather and people being stuck at airports around the UK. Yeah, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, and that's the way to do it. Well, many, many thanks. Is it too early to make a date for 2026?
Yes, much too early for
But you
that.
will be in touch.
Absolutely. Yes, do
Thanks
that.
ever, Isabel. As ever, many
Thank,
thanks. Cheers for now.
thanks very much, Tony.